The supply chain is not part of the economy. The supply chain is the economy.
Why do you think people should read your book, Sold Out? What's in it for them?
Well, a lot, Robert. Thank you. The thing about the supply chain, I did all the research for the book. You say, well, okay, I got a loaf of bread. Yeah, but there's no bread on the shelf. Where's the bread? Well, all right. Well, for the bread, you need a baker, right? Okay. So, but you also need a truck driver to take it from the bakery to the shelf. You also need a wrapper. You got to put some plastic or paper around it or something. Well, the baker, he needs an oven, right? Where's the oven coming from? What about the electricity to power the oven? You need some ingredients. Where's the wheat? Well, the wheat doesn't come from the wheat field. It goes to a mill first and gets ground up into flour and all that. But the mill gets it from a farmer. Where's the farmer get it? Well, he needs nitrogen, fertilizer to grow the field. He needs a tractor and diesel fuel to plow the wheat, et cetera. So the point is, you can segment a supply chain and say, well, you got to get from the bakery to the store. Yeah, that's valid. But every step along the way, first of all, the entire what's called the extended supply chain is much, much longer than people realize, number one.
Correct.
Number two, every spot on that supply chain has its own supply chain of inputs and outputs so that they can hold up their end. That's just all for a loaf of bread. So the more you get into it, again, you study this, Robert, so you're familiar with this. The way I put it in the book, the supply chain is not part of the economy. The supply chain is the economy. They're so broad, so extensive, and so many moving parts that you can model it theoretically, and there's some math that you can apply, but nobody can comprehend it all. Yeah, in terms of the impact on the economy, it links very quickly to the monetary economy. We can talk about that as well. We have inflation. Everyone sees it. You got a Ford F-150 pickup truck, and it used to be $75 for a tank of gas. Now it's $150. Well, the demand for gasoline in that situation is what they call inelastic, which means you got to buy it no matter what the price is. You don't like paying the higher price. You see it. You see inflation at the gas pump. You got to buy it because you got a business to run or errands to do or whatever the case may be. But what it means is that in that example, that extra $75 to fill up your tank twice a week, let's say, so $150, that comes out of something else. You're not going out for dinner. You're not buying a new dress or a new suit or a sporting event or a concert or whatever it may be. So there's demand destruction. It may not be at the gas pump, but it's in everywhere else in the economy.
Right.
So you get these ripple effects. So the supply chain dysfunction, which in my example shows up in the form of higher gasoline prices, then ripples throughout the entire economy. So the impact is enormous. Supply chains are not new. So they had the supply chain then. So what's new about the supply chain? And what's new, and this really started in 1989, is what I call supply chain science, that it became an academic subject. There are a lot of colleges, you get a major in supply chain studies. But it's a combination of increased computing power, new algorithms, artificial intelligence, and then new technology. So we got extended supply chains. So it was really the scientific aspect of it, the academic aspect of it that transformed it. And it developed into what I call supply chain 1.0, which is 1989 to 2019. So that was a 30-year stretch. That has now collapsed. But the thing that caused it to collapse, there were a number of things. Everyone looks at the war in Ukraine and Russian sanctions, so that made it worse. And then they look at the pandemic and the pandemic panic and the fascist public policy that came out of it. Well, that made it worse. But it really started, you can trace it back to the Trump tariffs in 2018, because I found some research on cargo shipments, because there are all these vessels, again, you know this from your experience, Robert, oil tankers, dry bulk carriers, other kinds of container cargo ships, etc. We know where they all are. They all have GPS. Unless there are a couple pirates here and there, but basically we know where they're leaving, where they're going, what they have. It's all publicly available. And this one researcher tracked it, and she could show the breakdown beginning in 2018. 2018, Trump puts tariffs on China on appliances and solar panels. So, Korea makes some, but it was mostly coming from China. It was really targeted at China. And I don't want to debate the tariffs. I actually think it was a good idea by Trump, but I'm not here to debate that public policy. I'm trying to explain how this thing broke down. So what did China do? Well, China, U.S. and Brazil are the two biggest producers of soybeans. China is the biggest importer of soybeans because they need the protein and they don't have that much. And so China was buying their soybeans from the U.S. because they're like, hey, this is one way to kind of balance trade with the U.S. The deficit won't be quite so big because we'll buy their soybeans. Well, when Trump throws the tariffs on China, China says, we're buying our soybeans from Brazil. And they shifted all those purchase orders to Brazil. Well, that's not a phone call. I mean, you got to reroute vessels, you got to expand port capacity, you got to get transportation lanes from the farmers to the ports, et cetera. And the people who do that, the real people, real companies, they don't want a 6-month deal, they want a 5-year deal. So that was all done, but you've now scrambled vessels all over the world, changed, port entry and embarkation, et cetera, on like a 5-year basis. And so they're now, China's getting the soybeans from Brazil. What's the U.S. doing with all the soybeans? Well, we looked around and said, well, the Netherlands takes them. So we're sending them to the Netherlands. Well, again, you got to scramble vessels. You're not going through the Panama Canal anymore. You're coming out of the port of Houston, et cetera. So it's a concrete example of how, the ICANN sit in Washington and say, throw tariffs on the Chinese. But now you're scrambling global trade. That has, again, as I mentioned, taken 30 years to build. And the same thing's going on with semiconductor sanctions. And again, COVID made it worse, pandemic made it worse, and Ukraine made it worse. So we are where we are. But that's really the point. It's a complex dynamic system. You tweak one little bit and then it collapses over there. And everyone said, how did that happen? Well, the answer is that's how it happens. That has now collapsed. We still have stuff, but we're in a very muddling phase. We're going to have supply chain 2.0, the new supply chain. I talk about that in the book.
You said supply chain 2.0. Is that to come?
It's to come, but it's... So what we're going to have, I call it a college of nations. Janet Yellen has called it friendshoring. Emmanuel Macron has called it a constellation of nations, different names. But what it means is that we'll trade and we'll have supply chains, but it will just be our friends. In other words, democratic, liberal societies, I don't want to get into politics, but broadly speaking, U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Western Europe, probably India, a few other countries, will trade with each other because we're not enemies. But China is going to be on their own. China, and by the way, people say U.S. is decoupling from China. That's true, but China is decoupling from the U.S. This is mutual. This is like a bad breakup, and China wants out as much as we do. So, but China is going to have to figure out its own supply chain. Who are its partners going to be? Well, they'll get natural resources from Africa and outsource their manufacturing to South Asia. So life will go on, but it will be much less efficient, but more resilient. And that's the trade-off. The reason things are breaking down is that once the science kicked in, the math and the AI and the computing power and all the things I mentioned, what was the goal? What were they trying to do? Well, they were trying to lower costs. So we'll outsource to China because labor costs are lower. We'll basically get our natural resources from some other place.
So if you understand that's what Jim's book Sold Out is to you, is once you can see what's going on, and there's an old song by Buffalo Springfield, battle lines are being drawn. You're either on China's side or you're on our side. And that's going to be the world economy. This guy gets it. He gets it. And so we're very happy to have him. His latest book is called Sold Out. I think everybody should read it because it's macro, macro, macro. You'll see where the world economy is shifting to, from who, to where, and why.